You know how they say your gut always knows before your brain does? I felt it the moment I pulled into the driveway. Something was wrong. The porch light was on, casting that familiar yellow glow over the steps, but it felt artificial, like someone had staged a scene and hoped I wouldn't notice the cracks underneath. That I killed the engine and just sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than I realized that it was supposed to be an ordinary night. One of those small victories. Getting home from a business trip a day early, a surprise dinner in hand, ready to be the hero walking through that door. Instead, I found myself hesitating, listening, watching. The house looked peaceful from the outside, that a little too peaceful. No sound of the TV. No clatter from the kitchen, just silence, heavy and pressing. That I stepped out of the truck, the cold air biting against my skin. As I climbed the porch, I noticed the front door wasn't fully latched, just slightly ajar. A detail so small you might miss it, unless you were looking for something to be wrong. My heart thudded hard against my ribs as I pushed the door open. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of perfume, but not the scent I knew, not the soft vanilla she always wore. This was sharper, cheaper, almost desperate. Rachel? I called out. My voice sounded foreign in the stillness. No answer. I moved through the hallway, setting the dinner bag down on the side table without even thinking. Every step forward felt heavier, like wading into deep, dark water you couldn't see the bottom of. As I turned the corner into the living room, I caught sight of them, Rachel, and him. He was half-dressed, lounging back on our couch like he owned the place. She was sitting close, too close, her hand resting casually on his chest, laughing at something he said. They hadn't even heard me come in. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The world narrowed down to a pinpoint, and all I could hear was the pounding of blood in my ears. When Rachel finally noticed me, she froze, the color draining from her face so fast I thought she might faint. The guy, some slick-looking stranger with a tattoo creeping up his neck, shot to his feet. "Hey, man, it's not what it looks like," he blurted out. Classic. Rachel opened her mouth, probably to offer some excuse, some desperate, ridiculous lie, but I didn't give her the chance. "Get out," I said, my voice low and razor-sharp. For a second neither of them moved. Maybe they thought I was bluffing, maybe they thought the nice guy, the dependable husband, would just stand there, swallowing the humiliation like a good little fool. I took a step forward. The guy grabbed his shirt off the floor and bolted for the door, muttering something under his breath. I didn't even bother to listen. Rachel stood there, wrapped in a blanket of silence, arms crossed tightly over herself. I could see the tremble in her fingers, the way she bit her lip, not out of guilt, but fear. "How long?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's not, it was just, how long, Rachel?" She stared at me, wide-eyed, caught between lying and telling a truth that would gut me. 6 months, she finally whispered. I laughed, not because it was funny, not because it hurt any less, but because part of me had already known. 6 months, while I was breaking my back at work, while I was planning anniversary trips and saving for a down payment on a cabin up north. 6 months of lies, fake smiles, hollow kisses. I turned away from her because if I looked any longer, I might do something I'd regret. That's when I noticed the second phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, hidden behind the fruit bowl, sleek, new, definitely not her usual cracked old Samsung. I picked it up, flipped it over in my hand, locked. But it didn't matter. I knew exactly what it was. I looked back at her. She was still frozen there, watching me, breathing like a cornered animal. "You have no idea what you've started," I said, and I meant it, because at that moment, standing there with her betrayal staining the air between us, something inside me hardened, something cold, something sharp. This wasn't just an affair, this was the beginning of something much bigger, something she would regret for the rest of her life. I barely slept that night. Rachel had locked herself in the bedroom, our bedroom, and I let her. I couldn't stand the sight of her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, her fake laugh, his hand on her, the cheap perfume clogging the air where love used to live. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, the second phone lying there like a loaded weapon. By 3 in the morning, I decided I was done wondering. I grabbed one of those cheap phone cracking tools from the garage, a relic from when I used to jailbreak old devices for fun. It didn't take long. Whoever set up this phone hadn't been too careful. Password, 0421. Her birthday, arrogant, lazy. Or maybe she never imagined I'd actually dig. The phone opened, and my world caved in. The first thing I saw was the messages, hundreds of them, not just to the guy from last night. To others, men I didn't know. Different names, different faces, different cities, most of them used code names, client, delivery, pickup. They talked about meeting spots, money, photographs that my stomach twisted tighter with every scroll. There were photos too, grainy snapshots of Rachel dressed up, posing in cheap hotel rooms, videos I didn't even want to open. She wasn't just having an affair, she was living an entirely different life. A life built on lies, secrets, and something that stank worse than just cheating. Around 4 in the morning, I found the folder that changed everything. It was buried deep inside the phone, a hidden app disguised as a calculator. Inside were scanned IDs, signed contracts, payment receipts, names, addresses. A contact list that didn't read like boyfriends or flings. It read like clients, like targets. I sat back in my chair, cold sweat trickling down my spine. This wasn't just adultery, this wasn't about love or even lust, this was organized. It was a machine. A business. And Rachel was part of it. By sunrise, the rage had burned itself into something colder, harder. I stood at the kitchen window, sipping black coffee that tasted like ashes, watching the first weak light of morning crawl across the backyard. I kept thinking back to the little signs I'd ignored, the random cash deposits into her account, the late nights she brushed off, the new clothes she bought but never wore around me, the way she started locking her laptop when she used to leave it wide open. I'd explained it all away, told myself marriages went through rough patches. Told myself she was tired, stressed, needed space. I had trusted her because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what love is supposed to mean, but love wasn't what she'd been selling. It was a mask. A costume. The woman sleeping upstairs wasn't my wife, she was a stranger who had learned my habits, my weaknesses, my blind spots, and used them all against me. I went into the garage around 7. Found the old storage boxes marked, taxes, and receipts she insisted on keeping. Sat down cross-legged on the cold concrete floor and started pulling out paper, bank statements. Travel bookings, old credit card bills. I combed through it all like a bloodhound, and that's when I found it, a series of flight receipts, first-class tickets, booked months ago, not for business, not for vacations we never took. Round-trip flights between major cities, patterned around certain weekends when she told me she was visiting her mother, or at a conference. Except the destinations didn't match her stories, and sometimes, she booked 2 seats, not just for her, she was flying with someone. Or worse, she was delivering something. The pieces were falling together faster now, sharper, more painful. Rachel wasn't just cheating on me, she wasn't just leading a double life, she was a small part of something much bigger. A network. An operation, and somehow, stupidly, blindly, I had been financing it. Every time I covered for her, every time I told myself it would get better. I had been playing the fool in a game I didn't even know I was part of, but not anymore. I slid the second phone into a Ziploc bag like evidence from a crime scene, because that's what it was. This wasn't personal anymore, this wasn't about saving a marriage, this was war. And if Rachel thought she had me cornered, if she thought I was the same naive man who walked through that door last night, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. I didn't confront Rachel that morning. She stumbled downstairs around 9, wrapped in a blanket, mascara smudged under her eyes, pretending like it was just another bad dream we could sweep under the rug. She barely looked at me, and when she did, it was with that mixture of guilt and calculation I'd seen the night before. I said nothing, just sipped my coffee and watched her. It unsettled her more than shouting ever could. She mumbled something about needing to clear her head and left, keys jangling nervously in her hand, that ridiculous excuse for perfume still lingering behind her like a warning. The moment the door slammed, I got to work. The second phone had given me a start, but the laptop, that was the motherlode. Rachel wasn't as careful as she thought she was. Maybe she believed I'd never suspect her, maybe she thought I was too soft, too trusting to ever look. That mistake would cost her. It didn't take long to find the hidden folders on her computer, buried behind innocent file names like tax documents and recipes. Inside were spreadsheets, detailed logs of transactions, dates, locations, even descriptions. First, it read like a ledger for someone running a side hustle, but the more I scrolled, the colder my blood ran. Names I didn't recognize, codes, cash transfers through shady apps, encrypted messages. Rachel wasn't just cheating, she was moving money, she was part of something structured, something dangerous, and the further I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't about passion or loneliness or the kind of mistakes you could blame on a few too many drinks. Rachel was deep in it, trafficking information, running blackmail operations, maybe worse. There were photos too, not of her this time, but of other people. Well-dressed men and women, powerful-looking types, snapped secretly in airports, hotels, expensive restaurants. Some of them were marked with little notes: candidate, weak spot, gambling. Target, owes heavy debt. It wasn't random, they were profiling people, and Rachel, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was a cog in that machine. That I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process it all. The walls of the house felt like they were pressing in, tighter and tighter. There were flashes from the past year I couldn't ignore anymore, the trip she couldn't explain, the new friends she was too vague about. The time she came home with bruises she brushed off as, just clumsy. The private conversations she took outside when she thought I wasn't listening, pieces of a puzzle I'd refused to assemble, until now, and at the center of it all was Rachel, not a victim. A volunteer. A player. For the first time in my life, I realized the woman upstairs wasn't someone who had lost her way. She had chosen this life, chosen it over me, over us, and now she was in so deep, she either couldn't, or wouldn't, get out. That I could have packed my bags right then, walked away, told myself I didn't owe her another second of my life. But something stopped me. It wasn't just pride. It wasn't even anger. It was the understanding that if I walked now, she wouldn't just walk free, she would keep lying, keep hurting other people, dragging more lives into this mess, and me, I'd be nothing more than another fool she burned on her way up. No, I wasn't going to run. If she thought she could make a mockery of everything we built, if she thought she could spit on my loyalty, my love, my sacrifice, she hadn't understood the man she married at all. I closed the laptop, heart steady now. There would be no screaming matches. No drunken rants. No messy scenes in front of neighbors. There would only be silence, observation, preparation, and when the time came, Rachel wouldn't even see it coming. The first thing I needed was someone I could trust, someone who didn't just owe me favors, someone who understood that this wasn't going to be a clean fight. It was going to get ugly, dangerous, and there was no room for second chances. I thought of Marcus. We served together years ago, back before life softened me up with mortgages and birthday parties and dinner dates. Back when survival meant reading danger before it announced itself. I hadn't talked to him in a while, life got busy, we drifted, but if there was one man I knew would answer the call without asking 1,000 questions, it was Marcus. I sent one text: need to meet, urgent, you in? He answered in less than a minute: always, tell me when and where. We met at a dive bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody remembered your name if they ever knew it in the first place. Perfect. Marcus hadn't changed much, broader maybe, a few more lines around his eyes, but the same iron spine, same quick mind hiding behind that slow, easy smile. He took one look at me and said, who do I have to hurt? I cracked a dry smile for the first time in days. Not yet. First, we gather information. Over 2 beers and a basket of stale fries, I told him everything: the second phone, the secret bank accounts, the photos, the criminal web Rachel had woven herself into. I half expected him to call me crazy. Or tell me to get a lawyer, get a divorce, move on with my life, but Marcus just nodded, his expression tightening. You're sitting on a bomb, he said finally. And it's bigger than you think. He told me stories, things he'd seen after leaving the military, working in private security, about networks that looked like affairs on the surface but were really pipelines, blackmail rings, exploitation hubs, quiet wars fought in hotel rooms and boardrooms, where the people you trusted were the ones setting you up. Rachel wasn't some unlucky wife who got seduced by a bad crowd, she was a recruiter. A bait, and odds were, she wasn't working alone. You sure you're ready for this? Marcus asked, leveling me with a look that cut straight through any leftover illusions I had. I didn't hesitate. I'm ready. He clapped me on the shoulder. Good. Then first lesson, you don't confront the snake in its hole, you smoke it out. We spent the next few hours building a plan. Marcus had contacts, a guy who could run deep background checks, another who could spoof GPS locations, someone who could pull security footage without triggering alarms. We didn't need brute force. We needed proof strong enough to destroy the network without getting ourselves buried alongside it, and Rachel, she was the key. She had no idea I knew. No clue I was already watching her every move. It made her careless, that weekend, while she pretended to be at a yoga retreat. Marcus and I followed her instead, from a distance, patient, invisible. We tracked her to a rundown office building in a bad part of the city, unmarked door. Blacked out windows. We watched as she met 2 men, older, sharp-dressed, the kind of guys who smiled too much and never smiled with their eyes. They handed her a flash drive. She handed them a slim envelope, money probably. Or worse, names. Marcus snapped photos from the next building's rooftop, long lens camera clicking softly with every movement that we stayed long enough to get what we needed, then pulled back, leaving no trace we'd ever been there. Back at my place, we dumped everything onto a hard drive and locked it away. It was more than enough to bring the entire house of cards crashing down, but if we moved too soon, they'd smell it, and then they'd run. Or worse, they'd come after me. I sat in my living room that night, lights off, laptop screen casting a cold glow across the room, watching Rachel's face in those photos, smiling, laughing, plotting. There was no regret there. No hesitation. She wasn't trapped, she wasn't scared, she was thriving. For a brief moment rage surged through me so strong it blurred my vision, but I forced it down, forced myself to breathe slow. The worst thing I could do was let emotions run the show. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore, this was about strategy, about precision, about setting the perfect trap. Rachel had made her choices. She'd forgotten one thing, though, something the network hadn't accounted for, that I wasn't the man she thought she married anymore, and the next time she looked me in the eye, it wouldn't be as her husband. It would be as her executioner. Marcus and I spent the next week building the trap. We couldn't afford a single mistake, not with people like this. They weren't the type to threaten you with angry texts or bad reviews, they were the type to make you disappear. So we planned everything down to the last detail. First, I made myself useful. I acted normal around Rachel, polite, distant, but not enough to raise alarms. She bought it. Of course she did. She thought she had already won. She was busier than ever, work trips, late nights, secretive phone calls. She thought I couldn't hear through the walls, but I heard everything, every coded conversation, every slip when she thought I wasn't paying attention, and then we found it, the opportunity we needed. One night, Rachel left her laptop open while she showered. Maybe she was rushing, maybe she thought I was too beaten down to snoop anymore, but the messages were right there, flashing across the screen. A meeting, end of the month. Warehouse district. High value exchange, she was going to deliver something big, something that would solidify her place in the network. It was her promotion day, and it was going to be the day everything fell apart. Marcus and I worked like ghosts. We rented a small office near the warehouse, stocked it with surveillance gear, hidden cameras, microphones, signal jammers ready to block any sudden calls for backup. We had a team on standby, Marcus' old contacts, men who didn't scare easy and didn't ask stupid questions, and then we set the bait, using the information from Rachel's secret files. We created a fake buyer.an insider, someone too valuable for her network to resist. Rachel fell for it faster than I expected. The messages I sent her, carefully disguised through encrypted channels, promised a payday bigger than anything she'd touched before, enough to buy her a new life, enough to make her think she was finally escaping whatever debt she owed inside that world. She answered within hours, interested, confirmed details. When the night of the meeting came, the city was soaked with rain, the streets slick and shining under flickering streetlights, perfect cover. I watched from the office rooftop, rain dripping off the brim of my cap, heart hammering a slow, steady rhythm in my ears. Below, the warehouse loomed, rusted, hollow, forgotten by the rest of the world. A fitting place for betrayal to be buried. At exactly 11:00 p.m., Rachel's car pulled up. She stepped out, dressed like she was going to a funeral, black coat, black heels, black gloves. For a second, I saw the woman I had married, and then I remembered the second phone, the secret accounts, the men in cheap suits handing her blood money in exchange for lives. The love I felt twisted inside me, collapsed under its own weight. There was no coming back from this. Rachel moved toward the warehouse entrance, checking her phone once, twice, before slipping inside, right into the web we had spun. Inside, Marcus and the team were waiting, hidden behind crates and broken machinery. I watched through the hidden cameras as Rachel walked into the center of the room, every step confident, every move rehearsed. She thought she was in control. She had no idea she was already cornered. Another car arrived minutes later. 3 men, expensive suits, faces hard, predatory, the real buyers, the ones who thought they were untouchable. Rachel smiled at them. That same fake, polished smile I used to think was just for me. They exchanged briefcases, documents. And right when she thought the deal was sealed, Marcus stepped out from the shadows. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm, almost friendly. "Mind if we have a word?" The panic hit them fast. One man reached for his jacket, probably going for a weapon, but Marcus' team had them disarmed and restrained before they could even blink. Rachel stood frozen, briefcase still clutched in her hand. Her eyes darted around the room, confused, desperate, until they locked onto the hidden camera, the little blinking light tucked just above the door. recognition dawned on her face. And then she saw me that I stepped into the light, soaked from the rain, hands in my jacket pockets, her face crumbled. She opened her mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to lie. I'll never know that I didn't give her the chance. That I held up my phone, showing her the live feed, footage of her handing off evidence, footage of her smiling, sealing her own fate. Her lips moved. My name. A plea. That I turned away. Marcus' voice echoed behind me, low and cold. You made your choices, lady, now you live with them. We left them there, gift-wrapped for the authorities, along with all the evidence they needed to blow the network wide open. By the time the cops raided the place, we were already long gone, clean, invisible, just two shadows disappearing into the night. Victory is never clean. For a few days after the sting, it almost felt like it was over. Rachel and her new friends were in custody, the evidence was airtight, the network was crumbling from the inside. That I should have felt free. That I should have felt like I could finally breathe again. But if there's one thing I learned in the military, and life, it's that wounded animals are the most dangerous, and this thing we had taken down. It wasn't dead, not yet. It started with small things. My mailbox was smashed open. One morning, papers scattered like dead leaves across the lawn. That I found a black SUV idling across the street late at night, headlights off, engine humming low like a warning. Marcus said to stay sharp, keep my head down. That he offered to stay close for a while, help watch my back. That I told him I could handle it. Stupid. 2 days later, I found my truck keyed from bumper to bumper. One word, etched deep into the paint. Traitor. It wasn't Rachel. It was the people she worked for, the ones still trying to survive the collapse. And now, I wasn't just the man who exposed them. That I was the man they blamed for losing everything. Marcus and I tightened our security, cameras around the house. A new alarm system, weapons loaded and locked within reach. But the real trouble wasn't just out there. It came in the form of a knock on my door one rainy evening. When I opened it, I half expected another thug or a threat shoved into my hand. Instead, it was her, not Rachel, another woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a tight braid. Eyes sharp and tired, she introduced herself only by her first name, Maya. I used to work with Rachel, she said, voice low, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I didn't invite her in. I didn't trust easily anymore. She understood, stayed on the porch, getting soaked in the rain. I wasn't part of the worst of it, she said quickly. I didn't have a choice. They own people, debts, families. You get in, and you don't get out. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in months, I saw something genuine, not a lie, not a mask, fear, real fear. They're not finished, she said. The network, it's bigger than you know. What you exposed, it's just one branch. I stared at her, trying to keep my breathing steady. She handed me a flash drive, her fingers trembling. This is what I have, she said. Names, accounts, hidden locations. It's not everything, but it's enough. Why give it to me? I asked. Because they're coming for you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. And if you go down, so does the last chance to finish this. With that, she turned and disappeared into the rain, leaving me standing there, heart pounding. I closed the door and locked it behind me, every sense wired tight. The flash drive felt heavy in my hand, heavier than anything I'd held since a rifle in the sand-blasted deserts years ago. I plugged it into a burner laptop and watched as it unfolded. Names I recognized, names I didn't, politicians, bankers, law enforcement. Some of them right here in this city. They weren't just running small-time scams, they were bleeding communities dry, using blackmail, fraud, and fear to carve out power in places you'd never think to look. Rachel had been a pawn, a willing one, yes, but still just a piece. The real monsters were still out there, and now, thanks to Maya, I knew who they were, but so did they. When I woke up the next morning, there was a note pinned under my windshield wiper. No threats and no insults, just 3 words written in blocky, angry letters, we see you. I didn't panic. I didn't call the cops. Half of them were probably compromised anyway. Instead, I packed a bag, cash, weapons. 2 changes of clothes. A burner phone. Marcus met me at the edge of town. You sure about this? He asked. I nodded once. I didn't come this far to flinch now. We drove north, leaving behind everything, the house, the job, the life I thought was carved in stone. Because some wars you can't fight from your front porch, some battles need fire, need patience, need the willingness to lose everything for the right kind of win. We had the evidence, we had the will. Now all that was left was the final move, the checkmate. We set up shop in a small town 2 states away. They rented cabin off a dirt road, no neighbors for miles, no cell towers strong enough to track without a struggle. It wasn't much, but it was enough that we spent the first few days sorting through the flash drive Maya had given me, cross-referencing it with everything Marcus contacts could dig up. Piece by piece, we built the case: politicians laundering money through charities, bank executives manipulating mortgages to ruin middle-class families, police captains wiping records for the right price. It was a sickness, and Rachel, in her greed, had only been a symptom. The disease went deep, and wide. If I'd ever thought taking her down would be enough, I saw now how small that thinking had been. This was bigger than her, bigger than me, but that didn't scare me anymore. It fueled me. Marcus reached out to an old contact, a journalist from the war years, the kind of man who still believed in truth even when it wasn't fashionable anymore. His name was Logan, and Logan didn't just want the story. He wanted blood. He knew how to move in the shadows, how to publish without tipping off the wrong people. We smuggled the evidence to him in parts. No names, no direct trails back to me. Not yet. I wasn't looking for headlines. I was looking for detonation. By the time we gave him the final piece, the names of the people running the operation, Logan looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "You know they're going to come after you," he said quietly. "I'm counting on it," I answered. The article dropped 3 weeks later, not on a major news site, not on cable networks owned by the same people we were exposing. Logan had connections in the underground press, the real one, the kind that couldn't be bought or threatened. The story hit the internet like a sledgehammer. Thousands of pages of documents, wire transfers, audio recordings, videos of secret meetings, names, faces, dates, all laid bare. No spin. No mercy. It didn't matter how rich or connected they were. Once the truth was out, it spread like wildfire. Resignations, investigations, quiet arrests made in the dead of night. One by one, they fell, and Rachel, she tried to cut a deal, of course, tried to paint herself as a victim, tried to weep in court, but the evidence we'd planted was too good, too thorough. She wasn't just another pawn anymore, she was a willing accomplice. A recruiter. A traitor. She got 15 years without parole. I didn't attend the sentencing. Some ghosts don't deserve your last glance. In the weeks that followed, I stayed on the move. I didn't need much: a battered pickup truck, a few clean clothes, a couple of burner phones. Freedom, I realized, wasn't a place. It was an absence. No more walking on eggshells. No more pretending to love someone who'd been hollow inside for years. I bought a little plot of land up north, enough to build a small house someday if I wanted. Enough to hear my own thoughts without someone trying to poison them. Some nights, I'd sit out under the stars with a beer in hand, the cold air stinging my skin, and I'd think about the man I used to be, the man who trusted too easily, who loved blindly, who believed loyalty was armor thick enough to stop betrayal. That man was gone, but in his place stood someone stronger, sharper. A man who could survive anything because he already had. I don't waste my time wondering if Rachel ever thinks about me. Regret was her burden to carry, not mine. As for me, I rebuilt myself out of the ruins she left behind. No anger. No bitterness, just quiet strength, and the unshakable knowledge that next time, if there ever is a next time, no one will ever mistake my kindness for weakness again. I had walked through fire, and come out made of steel.